Hi, I'm Neil Forsyth, and this is Be Inspired for BBC Writers. I think finding your voice is an ongoing process. Very important to recognise that, I think. I always think it's far more important to be an improving writer than a good writer. And I think finding your voice is part of that. You're always finessing, you're always trying to get to an even more honest position in your writing. I think for me, there's definitely been significant steps along the way. I think with Eric Ernie and me, for example, it was the first time I'd written a 1-hour script, and I found that a challenge, but I enjoyed it. Guilt, I think, was about probably getting even deeper into characters for me, probably using more things from my own life. And then The Gold is, I think I learned a lot about multi-strand storytelling, and again, just getting to that voice is it's an ongoing process. But I think also you've got to recognise that you're not going to be there straight away. I think finding your voice as a writer is a bit like growing up. You know, there's a very infantile stage, certainly an adolescent stage, which I think is probably signified by imitation. I think a lot of writing careers start with imitation. And then you're really just hoping that the longer you stick at it, there'll be a maturing, and you'll find more comfortable in your own skin and more comfortable in your own voice, and you'll kind of flesh it out as you go, I hope. I approach plotting a show very seriously, much more seriously than I used to. I think I used to not put as much importance as I should on structure, and I come up with lots of reasons for that. Often it was just procrastination or not wanting to take on the work, because it's very hard work structuring a story in a satisfying way. But it's such a vital part of the process. Pragmatically, I work off whiteboards and colour-coded post-it notes that you can move around and play with the story and see when a story should start or finish, or what stories play well off each other. It's a real science, I think, structuring an episode of television, particularly a complicated episode of television, and you have to put in that work, because if you put in that work, certainly in my experience, actually writing the script is fun. I enjoy it. I enjoy adding the dialogue to what I have, because I can relax knowing that I have a story that makes sense. I'm not writing a script knowing that there's 2 or 3 problems that I just couldn't face dealing with, and I'll have to try and write my way around it. So I think I do approach structuring seriously, and I think you really have to if you want to end up with a satisfying episode of television. I mean, the idea of storytelling ultimately is you work very hard so that it's invisible by the time that somebody's watching it. They're naturally getting pulled along in a narrative rhythm that makes sense and works because of all the work that you've done. I think obviously one of the differences is story decisions. In comedy, sometimes you're making story decisions at least partly because you think it'll lead to a funny situation. Whereas with drama, you're making story decisions because you think that this is part of building a thrilling and enthralling overall story. So comedy, you certainly have to take into account probably more with your storytelling, although you do often structure it dramatically at first. You are trying to put your characters into situations where they will react in amusing ways. Certainly the comedy, for me, as someone who now writes drama with kind of comedic elements to it, I think, is I've got a fairly clear rule of thumb that if there's a believable way that a character would react to the situation they're in that happens to also be comedic and authentically so, then that's great and I'll include it. But if I feel I'm doing it just to create a funny moment, then I'll either put it in and take it out, or won't do it in the first place. And actually, the more that I edit my scripts now, it's often the more humorous elements that are getting shaved off along the way, and you're left with moments that you think are very deserved. And the less of them they are, the more powerful and effective they'll be. Moving from writing books, where I started off writing novels and non-fiction books, to television was, I think I underestimated the technical challenges and things that you just have to learn in writing for television. That's probably a good thing, because I think I'd have been even more overwhelmed and intimidated by it otherwise. But it's, script writing I find it really a kind of magical process, and good and bad, in terms of it's hard to really get a grip sometimes of why a script works and why it doesn't. And you just learn more as you go. But I find the technical challenge of writing scripts never leaves. I'm always hitting more challenges and more problems and finding more solutions to it. And that's part of the process, and that's part of hopefully kind of growing as a writer. But you should not ignore the technical craft. You have to try and learn to some degree as a scriptwriter? Well, the challenges, or I guess the unique circumstances of writing a show like The Gold based on real events. Firstly, there's the research. I don't see that as a challenge. I really enjoy it. I work with great researchers. I have done in The Gold, and it makes such a difference when you just put the work in, and it's exciting just discovering story and what could be story. And there's a lot of elements in The Gold that were not widely publicised, some of which we found in old newspaper archives, for example, and that could be quite thrilling. So I think, first of all, it's building that big bank of research. Now, the big challenge is turning that into a television show. And I think there are certain skills you really have to kind of think about, which is compositing, for example, compositing story, compositing characters, taking multiple characters that essentially play the same role in the story and making them one, compositing different strands of story into one so it's more satisfying, maybe looking at timelines a little bit, and also looking at themes, finding themes within the real events and drawing that through the series, or finding themes that can connect events episodically or over the series. So there's lots of challenges. I mean, it's almost more important what you leave out than what you put in. I think that's the thing. It's really analysing every beat of the story and every character and every strand and thinking that might well be interesting and exciting in its own right. Does that deserve a place in this what is ultimately a diluted version of the story that you're trying to tell in your script? I think the important thing in writing compelling protagonists is to be interested in your character, be curious about your character, want to know more about the character that you've created or you're in the process of creating. And as such, you will add lots of nuance and elements to them. And understanding the character, I mean, you don't have to like your character, you don't have to agree with your character, it could be someone that you cross the street to avoid, but you need to understand them, you need to have a real inherent, visceral understanding of them, because you need to know how they're going to react to the situations that you put them in, you need to know how they're going to react to the characters that you surround them with. And the more you can think about your character in that dynamic way, it's not just who they are, it's what would they do in these situations. And the better that you understand them, it will help you with story. You know, strong characters help create strong story because they will make decisions and that will lead to the next event or the repercussions of the decisions. So it's just an understanding of the character and feeling that you've spent some time with them to let them kind of seep into you a little bit. And then it's the story to match. I mean, there's no point having incredibly nuanced characters that you know everything about, but you've got a very weak story to put them into, because a weak story will not help the character, they won't do anything interesting, or a story that doesn't make sense, they'll start to act inconsistently. So story and character have to sort of coexist in a very finessed way, and you've really got to put plenty of work into both of them. I think, I mean, we did 2 or 3 scenes with Guild where we shot at the top of Carlton Hill in Edinburgh, which is a landmark just off Princes Street with incredible views over Leith back towards Princes Street in the city. They were hopefully well-written scenes, brilliantly performed by Mark and Jamie. But for me, they meant a lot because I was standing in Carlton Hill, I think the sun was setting, and I could see the flats that I'd lived just off Leith Walk for many years. I could see the route that I'd walked to the pub that I worked in Edinburgh for many years when I was just really dreaming of being a writer and trying to get any kind of paid writing work or any sort of foot in any sort of door, you know. So it was a really special moment, you know, watching this BBC drama be filmed, and it felt kind of, it just felt remarkable. I mean, it always feels quite magical when you start making a television show. I've always got a moment where I can't quite believe this has happened, but that, you know, that really kind of stands in the memory. I suppose in terms of favourite scenes I've written, the honest answer would be the scenes that would spring to mind would be scenes that I'm writing just now in the script I'm working, and I think that's quite important as well. I think you've got to love the script you're writing, and that's the one that's going to kind of be in your thoughts, I think. The advice I'd give, well, I would say always know what you're going to write tomorrow. I think that's always helped me a lot. I think it avoids procrastination. It avoids the kind of tyranny of the blank page, I think. So the last thing I always do is essentially write a note to myself in the next morning about where I'm going to start, what I'm going to do first. And I think having that little prompt, I think, helps. I think you don't get up and try and feel your way into something. You think about that first job, a scene that's not working, some dialogue that you don't think is quite right, a little thing you want to look at in structure. Just do that first, and then you're off and running. I think identify the time of the day that you write the best and try and protect that time. I think, it's just trying to protect your writing, essentially, trying to get it going in the morning, get it going when you're going to write, and making sure you have as few interruptions as possible. I think in terms of the career, handling rejection is a big part of it. Always is. At any stage of your career, you're getting things that won't happen for whatever reason. I think it's about recognizing that you can handle rejection in different ways. You can become embittered and start to see great conspiracies and why you're not getting opportunities, and great resentment to those who are, or you can just double down to work hard. I think you kind of need three things. You need talent, luck, and hard work. And I think that the one element of those you can control is the hard work. So just putting the work in, there's no easy way around that. The advantage of that is you become a better writer. The more you write, the better you get. You have to just keep doing it. Try and work with great people. Work with people that will enhance your writing, that will kind of guide you through the more difficult stages of a career, that you feel that you have a creative connection to. I've been very lucky in my career. I've worked with brilliant producers, directors, and actors. I've got a great script editor, Rhiannon. She's also my wife, but you don't have to marry them. That's not vital. And I think finding people that can help you, as we talked about earlier, find your voice and find what you're trying to say and help you tell it in effective way as possible is brilliant. Don't be suspicious of people who are kind of coming in to work with you. See them positively as people that can enhance your work. And I think other than that, just make sure you enjoy. If you're not enjoying what you're writing, I often think that's a bit of a red flag. And if it's possible, then maybe you should think about going down another path. What you want to end up with is scripts that you're really proud of and you really believe in. So don't write a script because you think it's the kind of thing that might get made, or it's a bit similar to something on TV. Write the script you want to write, and worst case scenario, you'll have a script that you're proud of having written. The writing advice I always think about is the Martin Amis quote saying, all writing is a campaign against cliche. And I think that is really, really helpful, that you write, and again, it ties in what we talked about earlier about voice. You'll write that first draft, for example, when you write kind of what has to happen in that scene, and your characters say the kind of things that characters would say in that kind of scene. Recognize that's a first draft, and work it until you think, well, I'm telling this story in a way that no one else would have told it. And that might not be right, it might be wrong, it might not be good, it might, but it will be unique, and it won't be elements that you've borrowed from things you've seen or things that you've read, and it won't be easy dialogue or story twists that you've seen 100 times. I just think keep working the material until you think you've written something at its very worst is unique. Cracker, Jimmy McGovern, great hero of mine, fantastic writer. Watching Cracker when I was a teenager was, I think, life-changing creatively. Such a brilliant character, such a fantastic show that could incorporate that switch between comedy and drama so brilliantly. So Cracker, and then The Sopranos, which in my opinion is the best TV show ever made, in terms of a world that feels well realised and nuanced and full of 1,000 stories, and such incredible characterisation and performances, everything just coming together. Absolutely love The Sopranos, and I would include that. Then, honourable mentions for West Wing, I think, just for the dialogue. But I think my third entry, and for me, the one real masterpiece in the last sort of decade or so, would be Chernobyl. I think Chernobyl, if you want an example of storytelling you're not going to get better, of taking an incredibly complex, quite dry in many ways story, with not necessarily an enormous amount of events, and to create something that is gripping and immersive and just brilliant creative decisions made throughout in terms of how to shape that story. I think Chernobyl is a kind of, that's a lesson for all of us, I think.